joining us. I want to welcome to my left our guest for the first portion of our show, Ann Thompson from IndieWire and from Thompson on Hollywood, Eric Kohn, the lead critic from IndieWire, and Brian Brooks, the managing editor of IndieWire. Let's give them a hand. So this is a casual, informal opportunity for us and for you to interact with some of the talent and the filmmakers here at the Toronto International Film Festival every day at 12:30 to 1:30 every single day in this spot. You can see the schedule posted around. Today we have a really cool selection of guests. We're going to be starting off in a few minutes with David Schwimmer and Catherine Keener and Clive Owen from Trust. Actually, I just reminded myself as I said that. Catherine Keener, Mr. Flick. So it's going to be David Schwimmer and Clive Owen, who will be here in just a few minutes. They're a few minutes away. Every day for this program, as we start out, we're going to talk about some of the buzz here at the festival. And before I forget, if you're on BlackBerry Messenger, there's a PIN number you can use. If you're on BBM, you can send us questions for our guests. The PIN is on the IndieWire site, and if someone reminds me of it, I'll send it out. So we'll get you that in a minute when we get ready for it. But let me just start by talking about some of the buzz here in Toronto. It's obviously the opening day of the festival last night. The festival is really kicking off today. Ann Thompson, who's here with us, was just in Venice. She just flew in yesterday from Venice. Her arms are very tired.
Exactly.
And she's going to tell us about, let me throw it to Ann, because I want you to tell us, Ann, a little bit about some of the films you got a chance to see in Venice that are also playing here. You got a little bit of a jump on all of us here in Toronto. Tell us what the buzz is and some of the films that people have been talking about.
Black Swan played very, very well, the Darren Aronofsky film, and that's already being talked about as a real Oscar contender. Sofia Coppola's Somewhere was there, but that one is not coming here. The Julian Schnabel Moral was there. That played so-so, I would say. A very dark Palestinian drama, very straightforward. Sort of not what you expect from Schnabel, but we'll see how it plays here. And then, of course, the Joaquin Phoenix event, the performance art, whatever it is, hybrid doc, mock doc piece that Casey Affleck did. He came, Joaquin Phoenix, but he didn't show himself anywhere. So the big question here in Toronto is going to be, is he going to appear? Is he going to make an appearance? You say he is. I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it.
The word is, well, Eric, you were saying something about this morning. What's the word on this? Is he going to be
there?
Well,
word on the street is there's a Joaquin Phoenix imposter going along around town, and he's got an entourage with him, and he shows up places in a limo. And supposedly he may show up at the premiere tonight, and there are rumors of a confrontation between the real and the fake Joaquin. So if we're being spun by unseen marketing forces, that sort of just adds to the fun.
He was seen. I mean, Marco Mueller at Venice. He sat behind. In other words, Casey was in the row with empty seats next to him at the event, at the actual unveiling of the movie, which I would say has gotten very mixed response. But he was sitting in the theater several rows back, clean shaven and thin. And he was running around Venice, but he never participated in any press.
Okay, so you have to tell us. There's 250 some films here playing in Toronto. You've seen a few of them. And Eric, you've seen a few. Certainly, you've reviewed a bunch of them already. What's good and what's bad?
Well,
give us the top two best and top two worst.
Let Me In, the remake, surprisingly, of Let the Right One In, is one of my favorite movies of the year.
Of the whole year?
I would say extraordinary performances from Chloe Moretz and Jodie, whose name I always forget, and from The Road, and then the extraordinary Richard Jenkins. So I would definitely see that. Never Let Me Go, I'm high on. That one got mixed reviews. You saw it, or did you? In Telluride.
I haven't seen it yet. Eric can speak to that one.
Never Let Me Go is an interesting study in how depressed you can make an audience over a certain period of time. It's based on a 2005 novel about that sort of alternate history where people clone other people when they need organs donated, and so they spend their whole life knowing that this is their only purpose. So it's beautifully done. There's some remarkable performances, particularly from Carey Mulligan, but to say it's one note isn't exactly a put down from this movie. It's just that's the whole package. It's this extreme tragedy on a very low-key sort of plane of storytelling. I don't know if you feel that way.
I cried buckets.
I might just to add just to your question, I haven't seen films from Venice or Telluride, but just based on word on the street too, that I'm really looking forward to, The King's Speech, which I believe is tonight, and then from a Québécois filmmaker, I'm not, and my French is not so great, but Incendies.
Yeah, Incendies, Denis,
Yeah.
Villneuve. Incendies is incredible. It's the best film I saw in Telluride. It's playing here in a couple days. Denis will be here with us. Looks like at our schedule. Looking on the schedule here, not listed on our schedule. Actually, we added him on Sunday. I will double check that. But Denis will be with us at this event.
And the actor's name is Cody Smith McPhee.
Okay, very good. Okay, so let's now. What should we avoid? There's so many films here. You got a limited amount of time. What have you seen that you would suggest we pass on?
I hate to do that, really. I want people to discover things for themselves. I mean, if I didn't like morale, someone else might. You know, it isn't something that I would reject out of hand, honestly.
Okay, so now really quickly on the industry side.
I would reject I'm Still Here out of hand. I would say that that's a movie that is where I think Casey Affleck doesn't really get the moral ground that he's trying to travel. He thinks it's funny, and I'm not sure it is.
What are each of you most excited to see, other than films that have been mentioned? What are the ones that you're really just anxious for?
Well, I really want to see Black Swan. I'm just based on what you had to say and what we've talked about earlier. I'm just really curious as to how it is. I mean, I read somewhere where Darren Aronofsky said that it is a continuation of The Wrestler, which is kind of interesting because, you know, with staple guns going into someone's skin, and then suddenly you have these ballet people. So that's kind of interesting, really.
And I saw the film and Telluride. I think Black Swan is absolutely terrific.
Yeah.
It is intense. I think that Natalie Portman is absolutely incredible at a level of performance that equals you know, what we saw in The Wrestler. But what do you think? And what was the buzz in Venice? How are people reacting to it there?
There was a lot of, oh my God, Natalie Portman's going to be an Oscar contender all about this movie, and it's in contention. There's no question, but it has to cover a lot of ground, and it's very violent. It's very intense.
You think it's too? You wrote that it's going to be too intense for Oscar voters.
Well, they're a polite older group. You know, we'll see. If they think it's art, if they think it's one of the best movies they've ever seen, as they did with Silence of the Lambs or Gladiator or Braveheart, then it's in. I saw a very high-profile Academy member in Telluride, who I shouldn't out because he has his own personal taste. He loved the movie. He absolutely loved the movie. He was raving about it. Leaving the theater on Sunday, I guess when I saw it, he went up to Darren and gave him a big hug and was very excited about it. The other hit in Venice was Potiche, the Ozon film with Catherine Deneuve and Gerard Depardieu, and it's safe to say that was the crowd pleaser, along with Black Swan. We'll be back for another session of quote-unquote hot topics tomorrow. We'll talk about Venice. We'll talk about what you think, what we think are going to be some of the winning films, and what's the one film going into tomorrow's awards that you think we should keep an eye on. We'll talk more about Venice tomorrow. It's Troy Hark. It's called Detective D. It is an extraordinary, epic action adventure. CG, Andy Lau. It's going to win something. Okay, very good. Thank you to our first round of Hot Topics guests. Brian will be back in a few minutes to talk with Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez. Eric's got to go watch a bunch of movies and write about them. Ann Thompson will be having a conversation in just a few moments. We'll reset the stage. Do we need a couple more minutes? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, so we have to wait a couple more minutes because I saw Clive Owen walk in, and we'll have him momentarily. We're waiting for is David Schwimmer here yet? Not yet. Okay, so we're waiting. So we'll keep talking for another moment if you don't mind. The reason we start off with a Hot Topic segment is because it gives us a chance to not only talk about the festival, but also to bam.
Well, I wanted to keep talking about Black Swan a little bit because there is a lot to say about this movie. Particularly the sort of effect that
you saw it today?
I saw it this morning. There was a press screening, so it was interesting. I mean, to see essentially Aronofsky go back to his Requiem for a Dream, Pie Turf, and make a psychological thriller. You know, that's essentially what it is. But once it's associated with a high art form like this, you're going to have a totally different kind of audience for something that ordinarily you might see here at the Midnight Madness program or something like that. I mean, some of the ways that it is intense intense you might associate with a horror film, shot cuts and things like that. So it's interesting to see how the crossover works.
Did anybody here in the room, has anybody seen Black Swan? Did anybody see it this morning? I'm just curious if there's what the consensus is.
No, I talked to Darren in Venice, and Don't Look Now is definitely a reference point for him. Roman Polanski's Repulsion, I mean, that's the territory that he is consciously traveling in. And
Yeah.
for me, you know, she's a ballet dancer, but she's also hallucinating. She's not entirely seeing what's real and what's not real. And when you get into that terrain, it's frightening. You don't know what to expect, and she's doing things to her body. She's cutting herself. It's disturbing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a stigma associated with Oscar films that they tend to be very depressing and you know, all these sort of simplistic reductions of what sort of tone they have. But I don't remember the last time there was actually such a visceral, almost like a David Cronenberg type of discomfort, you know, with a movie that's associated with that kind of prestige.
Tell me more about the reaction after the screening. You were there, walking out, I presume, talking with other folks. What else were folks saying, and what was the sort of takeaway?
People liked it, but they were really uncomfortable, and the vibe in the screening room was sort of similar to that. There were scattered moments of laughter at parts that I think people use as sort of a safety mechanism when they're uncomfortable, and the ending is very dramatic. The soundtrack is turned up to the loudest volume, and everyone's sort of primed to applaud at that moment, but the applause fluctuated. It started up and then it went down, and somebody tried to start it up again, so it was almost like there was a physical disagreement going on there about what they just experienced. So,
what else have you seen in the last couple of days, Eric? And I know you just got here, but what else have you seen in a theater here, and how are people reacting to other films?
Well, the other movie that got sort of a muted reaction was Stone, which is John Graham. He made the Painted Veils film with Edward Norton as a convicted arsonist and Robert De Niro as this parole officer who gets into this sort of messy situation with the prisoner's wife and may or may not be sort of blackmailed by him. And it's a very strange, unsettling movie that involves ideas about Christian guilt. And it's sort of hard to understand exactly what this movie is trying to tell you about those sort of things. But I would say that it's probably the best thing De Niro's done in a really long time. It's a very intense, uncomfortable performance to watch, and you know, if anything, he should get some mileage out of it. But the movie itself is a little bit too muted and confusing to really get much momentum going.
The other movie that I saw in Venice that's playing here that I liked very much was Kelly Reichardt's Meek's Cutoff, which is a Western starring Michelle Williams in yet another great performance. She was also very good in Wendy and Lucy. And this is a frontier Western period, very intense. Also, they're under duress. They don't know where they are. They're lost, and Meek is trying to show them the way. And this is very much the year for beards. He's a famous Canadian actor who is unrecognizable.
Let me put a soft plug in for a movie that has no beards, which is Bruce McDonald's Trigger. It's the opening night movie at the Bell Lightbox.